Okay, welcome to week 6 of Exposure, my weekly video series where I put out a very imperfect video every week as an exposure for my OCD perfectionism in a bid to get more freedom from it. And this week I'm coming to you from, an unfamiliar place in the literal sense. I'm staying in a friend's apartment in Brooklyn that I've never stayed at before, but an all too familiar place psychologically, which is I was going to say OCD, but I'm actually not in OCD right now. It's very clear to me when I am in OCD, in part because there's a certain physical signature to it, a tightness in my jaw, a feeling of literal heat radiating off of my brain. I feel it in my head, and this tension in my body, and my breath is often tight. And no, I'm not in that place. But I guess I'm in a familiar place where I'm sort of flirting with it because I do have a decision to make. But maybe the reason I'm not in it is because I know this decision is ultimately not that important, and that to the extent that the OCD wants to lure me into obsessing over what the right choice is, it's trying to lure me away from the deeper thing, which is fear and heartbreak. Potential heartbreak, but, the feelings are there, the sensations are there, the emotions are there in my body, though they're not strong right now. So the specific decision is tomorrow I have a plane ticket going from New York to San Francisco, and I have a train ticket going from New York to Brookline, Massachusetts. Anna, I was going to say partner, but I don't know if that word applies anymore, but the woman I've been in a partnership with, a deep partnership with for the last year and a half, is in San Francisco. My family, my parents, my sister, brother-in-law, and my nephews and nieces are in Brookline, Massachusetts. And I don't know where I'm going to go. So yes, that is a familiar place. Though I'm feeling like I probably am going to go to Brookline. I'm probably not going to go to San Francisco because I don't know if Anna wants to see me. Let me modify that. I know she wants to see me. But she is, for the time being, not indulging that desire because, as she shared with me one of our last conversations, she doesn't want to see me because when she's with me, when she's in my presence, her heart is so loud, so clear, that it drowns out all the questions and concerns in her head. And she doesn't want that to happen now. She wants to go into those questions and concerns. So we're now midway through a 2-week break from having contact with each other. That was her request, so that she can try to get some clarity. I'm not going to go into everything that's happened, but I've talked about it in past weeks of this. But suffice to say, after a year and a half, her doubts and concerns have become intense. The sort of instigating incident was she met a guy who as she said, she's intrigued by his mind. Not attracted to him per se, but intrigued by his mind. And that's the first time this has happened to her. But yeah, I see it more and more as this is, maybe this guy will turn into something with her. She is seeing him, so they saw each other a couple of weeks ago, and he is going to be in San Francisco. He's probably in San Francisco at this moment, and they may be seeing each other at this very moment. They are going to be seeing each other today. But regardless of what happens with that, I think this made her realize that her doubts are maybe stronger than she realized, or certainly stronger than she has expressed to me in the past, though she certainly has expressed doubts. The thing about this relationship is we share everything with each other. There is no holding back. And a recurrent theme for her has been she loves me. She loves me tremendously, but she has concerns. I'd say primarily because, what she often says is, you're awful, but you're wonderful. As painful as it can be to be with you, you more than make up for that with how wonderful you are most of the time. And the pain is, I would say, pretty much always, if not outright OCD, my sort of addiction to optimizing, and the fact that I can get into these intense states. This just deep sense that something is wrong, which I've had from my earliest memories as a small child. This sense of something being wrong and not quite knowing what it is. now it manifests more as just something is happening I'm not liking. I'm feeling bad about where my career is at. I'm feeling worried about a situation, and that worry dominates. It's very strong in my body, and when something is strong in my body, it's hard for my head to not come in and try to fix it by figuring things out. And when I'm in this state, I can be unpleasant to be around, and that, can be unpleasant for her. I'm having a lot of doubts about this recording right now. The last few I've felt very present, and this one I'm not feeling very present. But good. This is a good exposure. If it's a bad video, it's a good exposure for my perfectionism. So and maybe the reason this doesn't feel so good is because there's not a lot of tension behind this decision right now. I feel relatively peaceful right now. The last video I recorded was right after the last conversation I had with her. It's now been a week, where it really felt like this could be the end of this relationship. And I felt devastated all night after that conversation. I woke up the next morning and felt great peace, relief even, which I was puzzled by. And I talked about this in the last video. I won't go into it all again now. But I think the relief was largely about there's fear in this relationship. And I don't think that means there's a problem with the relationship. I think the fear is there's a deep vulnerability, the deepest vulnerability I've had in at least 20 years with another human, and the deepest conscious vulnerability I've ever had, because the relationship that ended 20 years ago, where I was very in love, I wasn't aware of my vulnerability because I'd never suffered a deep heartbreak before. This, I'm acutely aware of my vulnerability because when I suffered that deep heartbreak 20 years ago, that's what led to the OCD. I didn't have OCD before. That led to tremendous suffering. Now, let me be clear. The heartbreak itself did not lead to the suffering. What led to the tremendous suffering was the avoidance of the heartbreak with OCD. Rather than feeling the loss in my body of this relationship 20 years ago, I went into my head and tried to figure everything out. Because this is the promise of, I think, all forms of OCD. It's a lie, but the promise is if you figure it out in your head, the feelings, the bad feelings will go away. I can only speak to my form of OCD, decision-making OCD. But so in my form, it's, if you get it right, when the OCD was really bad years and years ago, it was every decision, what shirt to wear. So put on the right shirt. If you can get the right shirt and it feels right, then you don't have to worry about this deep heartbreak. It's an insane delusion, but it's seductive because it promises relief and it delivers relief just often enough to kind of keep you hooked. One of the interesting findings of psychology, I was a psych major in college, is reinforcement schedules. So if you give a rat a food pellet every time it hits a lever, it's going to hit that lever, of course, consistently. But if you give a rat a food pellet only some of the time, randomly, sometimes it hits the lever and gets a food pellet, sometimes it hits the lever and it doesn't get a food pellet, it actually gets more addicted. It hits that lever with more fervor, more intensity, more frequency, which seems counterintuitive, but actually makes sense because sometimes you get it, sometimes you get it. So if you get it, you hit it again to get it again. If you get the hit, you hit it again. But if you don't get the hit, you're frantically hitting that lever even more because, oh no, now I really need the hit. I thought I was going to get the hit and I didn't get the hit. So I think that's part of why OCD is so addictive is sometimes you engage in a ritual, obsessive thinking, compulsive behavior, and you feel relief. But if you don't get that relief, you just redouble your efforts. So, this gesture means I've lost my train of thought. So that's how I developed OCD 20 years ago, is I didn't want to feel this heartbreak. This wasn't conscious, of course, but there was this deep loss, this heartbreak. I would use that term almost anatomically because that's where I feel loss, in the center of my chest, in my cardiac region. And I couldn't feel it. I wouldn't feel it. And so I got sucked in by this promise of just make every decision right. Pick the right shirt, decide the right side of the street to walk down, what bagel to order for breakfast, and you won't have to feel this. And the good thing is I'm not doing that now. I'm not getting sucked into that with this decision. So, but yes, there is fear and vulnerability in being this vulnerable with another human. For the last 20 years, all of the relationships I've had, none of those women could really hurt me because I wasn't that vulnerable with them. I didn't value it that much. the end of this relationship with Anna, I know will be devastating. But I know it intellectually. I think my immediate experience when I contemplated ending is right now often relief, because it removes the specific threat of deep vulnerability in the now, which is the only time that actually exists. It actually removes two threats. One is the threat of my own vulnerability, and the other is the pain of knowing that I hurt her. That's, I think, the big challenge of this relationship. As awful as I am, I'm not wonderful. Great, but she's just wonderful. This relationship, well, I can't say this relationship hasn't caused me pain and anxiety, but there's never been, not once have I come to meet, have I been going to meet Anna and I'm like worried, I'm like, oh, I hope she's in a good mood, because if she's upset about something, that's really going to affect our time together. She can be upset about things, but she's able to kind of not have it dominate. And I'm able to not have it dominate more and more, and that gives me hope, because I see it is a choice to some extent to let things go. And one of the amazing things about her is that apparently she used to be like me. I have trouble believing this, but before she lost her last partnership, a 6-year partnership that ended, well, now I guess it's been about 3 years, she says she was like me, where she would be upset about something and it could really affect her partner. And she was kind of putting it on her partner to fix it, in a way, even if it wasn't anything her partner could fix. And I see that tendency in myself. That sometimes I feel like if I'm in distress and I'm with her, it's not that I'm amplifying the distress, but there's almost less of a willingness to sit with it, because I think it is this infantile urge. I've shared this before. It's this thing of well, if I cry loudly enough, then mommy, because this was certainly present when I was a little boy with my mom, if I cry loudly enough, then mommy, or whatever woman whose breasts I'm suckling on, in this case Anna, is going to fix it. A trait that, as Anna would put it, very unappetizing. That's one of the words she uses, to devastating but also hilarious effect, I think. Very unappetizing in her inimitable Greek accent, so I won't attempt to imitate it. So the point being that, my states can negatively impact her. Her mood states really never negatively impact me. And that's the crux of this. So and that is painful for me, to contemplate that I bring this woman pain sometimes. And it also occurs to me, maybe there's an echo of my relationship with my mother, because I felt tremendous guilt and shame for the pain I brought my mother by being a really out of control kid. Not out of the house. Out of the house, I was perfectly well behaved. But in the house, I would get into these terrific screaming tantrums and fights with her on an almost daily basis, which would often result in her crying because she felt so hopeless in the face of this. And I felt tremendous shame and guilt over that. And so maybe there is some echo where I feel shame and guilt over how I can impact Anna. It's not quite the same, because with my mother, these fights were, they were fights. With Anna, it's not like her and I are getting into conflict that's upsetting her. It's just I'm in a state that's unpleasant to be around, but there may be something there. Point being, contemplating the relationship ending and the consequent removal of these two sources of my own pain. One, fear of deep vulnerability that I have with her. Two, the fact that I do sometimes cause her pain. It's understandable that when I think about those being removed, that I feel some relief. And I felt a lot of relief and a lot of peace the last week at my parents' place. And it was very sweet being with my father. We watch movies together now. That's our favorite activity. And I love it. And I've never been a movie person, really. But there's something about being with him. With his Alzheimer's, we can't have deep conversations anymore. That is gone. But he's still there. His love for me is still evident. And there's just something very sweet about sitting on the couch with him and just watching a movie. And, we make stupid, silly jokes back when we were watching Titanic together, which I've never seen before. And he, with the Alzheimer's, he makes the same jokes repeatedly. And he kept saying, I don't think I'd sell any of these people life insurance. Or we were joking about, he would say, I don't want to ruin it for you, but I think this ship might sink. And I'd be like, no, it's definitely not going to sink. It's unsinkable. And it's funny because these sort of redundant jokes he would make, there was a time when they really bothered me, I think, because they were a sign of his decline. But now I appreciate them. And part of being with him was also seeing how much this enhances his life. He has in some ways a lonely existence now. My mother is there, of course, and the nephews and nieces and sister and brother-in-law, and everyone loves him. But, he spends a lot of time watching TV alone, which he never did before. And yeah, I had this moment my last night there watching Titanic with him where it broke my fucking heart. Just realizing when I leave tomorrow night, he's going to be watching TV alone. And realizing what a singular place I fill in his life where, yeah, it's an easy relationship and a friendship that he doesn't have with anyone else. My mother and him, their relationship, after having a wonderful, wonderful partnership for 50 plus years, it's painful now for both of them because of the Alzheimer's. Because my mother has to essentially, in his words, nag him, but she has to do it. She has to remind him to take his medication. She has to remind him to drink enough water. She has to, tell him to do things that he has to do for his bare survival, but he resents her. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into it. That's their story. I'm leery of exposing other people's lives. This is my own exposure. So yeah, I felt a lot of peace and a lot of surrender. Ultimately where I came out at with Anna was if she feels it's better for her to not be in this relationship, then I accept that fully. I don't want her to be in this relationship if she doesn't think it's best for her. And I felt really okay with whatever happened. Now I'm feeling suspiciously okay, but it was it's kind of back to this place where it's yeah, whatever happens is cool. Yeah, no real sense of loss or pain. And then the day I was leaving to come to New York this weekend to do some shows here, I just suddenly, bang, got really into the OCD. Okay, I'm going to New York, but then where am I going? Am I going to go to San Francisco? Am I going to come back here? And I just was so locked in, jaw locked, brain hot, just full-blown OCD. And then I talked to my friend Carl. Carl is a very singular figure in my life. He is, so I have my show, The Mushroom Cure, and my director there is Jonathan Lippman, a great, great theater director. But I also have this thing called Adam Strauss is Not Unhappy, which this exposure is in some ways related to, because Adam Strauss is Not Unhappy is in some ways a live exposure. I'm going on stage unscripted. Though increasingly when I do it, I will have a structure. This, I have no structure, in case you can't tell. I have no idea what I'm going to say. But Carl is my creative, he doesn't call himself a director, but he's my creative collaborator on that. And on these exposure videos, not all of them, but often I will share them with him and he will watch them and give me his feedback. Because yes, this is primarily for me. This is an OCD exposure. But fuck, I'd be lying if I said I don't want a lot of people to see this. I don't want this to become popular. I don't want this to reach people and touch people. I don't want this to elevate my career. And so Carl gives me feedback, which it's not like I then edit the videos for those feedback, but it's kind of helping refine this process. So yes, I do want you to like this. Of course. I want more freedom from the perfectionism, but I want you to like this. I want everyone to like this. I want everyone to like me, of course. That neediness, that need for approval is strong. Otherwise, I don't think I would have become a performer in the first place. And I think that, in turn, stems from this deep sense of unworthiness that maybe comes from these feelings of shame of making my mother cry, maybe comes from another place, but this feeling of, there was a point when I was doing stand-up for a while where I realized, I'm looking for the audience to give me this love and approval that really, ultimately, who do I want it from? I want it from me. And I believe that's true, but yet I still want it from other people too. And I should say I have been able to give it more and more to myself. Yeah. Part of what's making this an exposure, I don't know if you can hear this, but there is a drill or something outside. And I am very noise sensitive, and that is continually distracting me, but I'm going to soldier on. Okay. Yeah, I'm not feeling good about this video at all. Okay. Yeah, I think there's something to that. The last couple of, there was just these deep, intense emotions and pains in the last two, and I was just able to kind of spit it out. And this one, suffering may be good for these videos, at least artistically. So, yeah, this relief. And then the day I'm leaving for New York, this just, what am I going to do? And so I talked to Carl. So Carl is sort of, he's my director on with the live version of this. Adam Strauss is Not Unhappy. He watches most of these videos. He's a dear friend, and he is a genius. And I don't use that word lightly. He has a mind, and I should say he's going to watch this most certainly. So I'm not just trying to flatter him. But no, he sees things at a level that I don't see. That's what I reserve that term for, genius. Not someone who's just prodigiously intelligent, but someone who is, has insights that I don't even know where they come from. I'm like, he'll say things about my art, but also about my life where I'm like, whoa, that never would have occurred to me, but there's a sense of truth, a ring of truth to it. And so I was sharing with Carl about, I'm so into this OCD right now. And he said, well, I think it's because you're not acknowledging the obvious. And I said, what is that? And he says, heartbreak. Your heart is breaking right now. You love this woman and you want to be with her and you know it, and it may be over. And when he said that, I could breathe. I just felt this deep pain that the OCD over San Francisco or coming back to Brookline was of course trying to mask this pain of, the obvious thing. Since I was talking about Titanic, it's sort of like that decision, San Francisco or Brookline is shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. The Titanic is the ship is going down. That is the deep pain. But of course, I don't know if the ship is going down. I don't know if this relationship is over. And I said to Carl, I don't know. I don't know if I definitely, I'm not sure if I definitely want this to continue. And he said, oh, I think you do, brother. I think you know. Like, you're in denial, but I think you know. And I said, but there's so much fear with this relationship, even when it's wonderful. And he said, yeah, that's going to be there with every relationship. That's just the way relationships are. And Carl had a marriage, his marriage, a somewhat short-lived marriage, but a marriage, and about a year ago. And so I said, sometimes though I think maybe it is better to be alone. And he said, I don't think so. He said, from my experience, I felt that way too. For a little bit when my marriage ended, there was a sense of relief, but no, I think you want to be in a relationship. I know I want to be in a relationship. I think he's right. And it felt to me like he was right then. And I guess the proof is what happened in my body, which was suddenly the OCD mostly dropped away, this decision. Oh, and Carl also said, point blank, I think you should come back to Brookline. I think you should come back to your parents, your nephews and nieces where you'll get love. I don't think you should go out to San Francisco until you know what's happening with Anna, because you don't want to be alone out there. And that made sense to me. And that intense pain in my heart that bloomed after that conversation was present all weekend, just really intense. But what I was doing is what I wasn't doing 20 years ago, which was really going into the feelings. This is something psychedelics have given me, this deep connection to my physical experience. Let me be more specific. Awareness. I'm aware of these sensations. And I have tools. IFS has been helpful, internal family systems, other acceptance techniques of really embracing these sensations, even if, of course, a part of me doesn't want them to be there. And so that's been what I've been doing over the last 24, 36 hours, is just really feeling that deep sense of loss and fear. And not going much into the OCD of where am I going on Monday, San Francisco or Brookline, though it's been, I haven't made the decision. But also contemplating, is Carl right? Do I really know that I do want to be in this relationship? And writing in my journal this morning where I came down on that is, well, my friend Jordan said something to me once that really resonated, which is, He said, you know a relationship is over when you stop growing and learning. And certainly by that standard, this relationship with Anna is not over. There's still a great deal of growth and learning, I think it's safe to say, on both of our parts. I think if I ask myself the question, is this going to work out? Is this the woman I'm going to spend my life with? Which was something we were talking about and contemplating just a few weeks ago before I was somewhat but not entirely blindsided by what's happened over the last week or two. If I ask that question, is she the one? I can't know the answer to that. But if I narrow it down, if I try to get rid of the time element, the future element, then it's clear. Do I want to keep being in this relationship? Yes, I do. There's a lot more learning and growth in this relationship. And I love her. As much as this scares the shit out of me, I love her. And I think there's a good chance that the parts of me that are like, I don't know about this relationship, which as I've shared before, in the past, those parts have been, not with Anna, with previous woman, it's like, yeah, she's beautiful, but you just don't have great conversation. Or you have great conversation, but are you really totally physically attracted to her? Or her sense of humor, you don't really jive there. There's always been specific, concrete objections or concerns with past relationships. With Anna, in a year and a half, there is not once, it's astonishing every time I hear myself say this, but it's true, there has not once been a specific objection and a concern. There's not once been I wish you were more like this, or I wish you were less like that. So the only doubts are these vague, I don't know, which comes up periodically. A friend of mine, Kevin, we were talking about this, and he called it, I don't know CD, which I love that term. He made it up. You have to give him credit. I don't know CD. So it's not the overt relationship OCD where it's like, this isn't quite right. This isn't right for these reasons. It's not that finding flaw thing. It's more, I don't know. And I think that's a testament to how wonderful Anna is, that my mind can find specific objections. So when I look at everything, I think the likelihood is that the parts of me that kind of are like, if this ends, maybe it's for the best, are more the parts that are just trying to avoid vulnerability. But even if it's not that, basically, if I continue in the relationship, I will get more clarity. I will also get more fear. That is inevitable. I've shared in my on-stage, Adam Strauss is Not Unhappy. I had a mushroom trip a year and a half ago where I essentially manifested Anna, where I, realized the reason I had not been in a deep relationship for 19 years at that point was because I was afraid of the vulnerability. And one of the things that triggered that realization, and after that I had to shift, and then 4 days later, Anna and I connected. Anyway, one of the things that triggered that realization was Khalil Gibran's poem, The Prophet, where he talks about the man who wants only the sweet parts of love, the easy parts of love. That man will live in a seasonless world where he will laugh, but not all the laughter, and cry, but not all of the tears. And I realized that's me. For 19 years, I've played it safe. And with Anna, over the last year and a half, there have been a lot. There has been, it's like, I am laughing all of the laughter. I am crying all of the tears. There's been no holding back in this relationship. But the thing Gibran does not talk about that I think is more powerful for me in some ways is fear. I've also had a lot more fear. I look back on those 19 years of loneliness, and there was a lot of sadness. There was this deep longing for love. And I haven't had any of that while I've been with Anna. There's been no loneliness with her. I think maybe that's what being in love is. It's just not being lonely. At least maybe in the early stages. I don't think that's always what it is. I think that's too simplistic and naive. But certainly I have not had this loneliness that was such a deep part of my existence for 19 years. That has gone away. That sadness has gone away. But I also have more fear. So if I have the option to continue with this relationship, because it is up to her, my answer is yes. But it's yes. It's yes knowing that, okay, that's going to open me up to more fear, more vulnerability, and it may not work. It may not work. Like if I were placing odds on this, the odds feel a lot less favorable than they felt a few weeks ago. But of course, that's a silly thing to say, the odds, because I have no fucking idea. I have no fucking idea. And that's the thing that OCD tries to eliminate, is uncertainty. I do not like uncertainty. I think humans generally don't like uncertainty. But uncertainty is all there is. And so the choice is clear cut. I want to keep laughing all of the laughter and crying all of the tears and feeling all of, maybe not all of it, feeling these deeper fears with Anna without knowing if it is going to work out. Yeah. So I don't think I'm going to go to San Francisco tomorrow, though I haven't canceled the ticket. But I don't think I'm going to go to San Francisco tomorrow. I think I'm going to go back to my parents and await word from Anna. Yeah, I mean, something happened interesting. So we haven't been in touch, but she added some shared photos to our shared Google album of pictures of us a couple of days ago. And when I saw that she did that, I felt really happy and relief. Like, okay, she's looking at pictures of me. Like, this clearly isn't totally over. And then I was like, maybe I should add photos to the album too. Like, maybe this is the level of conversation we're having. So I did. And then I found myself wanting to obsessively check as she added more photos to the album, but I let it go. Do I want to be with this woman for life? I can't answer that question. But I don't have to answer that question. Do I want to keep saying yes to this with the fear? Yes. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So that's what I can hold on to, is that certainty. This may not be right. It may not work out. It may cause more pain. There's all these mays and possibilities. But I do have a choice. Well, I have a choice if I want to say yes. But she has a choice too. And she has a choice too. I'm glad she has a choice. I'm glad this is happening in some way, because I feel like, yeah, if this continues, I want it to continue with a more, I want these reservations she has to, I don't know if they can be fully ameliorated, but yeah, it's out on the table now. I mean, again, it was out on the table before, but I think now there's an understanding of, on my part, of how troubling these have been for her. And that may also allow me to change more, because what I'm seeing is a lot of the suffering I cause her when I'm in these moods, I think I can do a better job managing. But this is the other thing, is I was doing a better job. As I've shared in past videos, I'd had this shift just before the last time we saw each other. Now it's been like a month or so, where I was getting a lot of freedom. And the last time we were together for 2 weeks in San Francisco, it's the easiest it's ever been. And when I hear myself say that, a part of me wonders, is this her self-protection? Is it like when things get better with me, does her own self-protection kick in and is like, oh no, you should get out of this? Whereas when things are worse with me, it's kind of maybe easier for her to be in it because there's a part of her that assumes it'll end. I don't know. I'm getting into some very abstract speculation. So I will most likely go to Brookline tomorrow, spend time with my family, my dad, and wait to hear from her. She had said 2 weeks, which would be another week from today. Yeah. So that is where things are at. And yeah, I feel pretty free right now. Though again, I haven't canceled my plane ticket to San Francisco, and I have to be leery of, even though I feel like I've made, I guess what my decision is I am going to wait until tomorrow morning, because if I do hear from her, I don't think it's impossible that I do hear from her. Maybe after she sees this guy today saying, hey, yeah, I do want to see you. Come to San Francisco. In which case I will. Okay, well, this has been, it feels to me, a particularly imperfect one, but who knows? That's where I'm at now. And now I'm going to go dance My favorite thing in New York, these daytime outdoor dance parties, Mr. Sunday, which I went to religiously for 14 years. I'm the longest running attendee, but I've gone to rarely this year because I haven't been in New York much. It's turned into an unexpectedly lovely fall Sunday. Yeah, and I'm going to dance this shit out, and that's going to feel good. All right.